Kalo Juvan Lana Meva Hata Menam Sanje Jumden Jawa Shaja Tuva Sazelo Jodo Jado Jawa Demba Jumden Dijin Wanda Jumba Yanda Banzo Ves Rada Jazo Demba Devare Shivan Jiden Jivun Deva Kalo Juvan Lana Hata Menam Demba Sanje Jumden Pejawa Shaja Tuva Sazelo Jodo Jado Demba Jumden Dijin Jawa Dajumba Zobe Sanje Riva Dansha Zon Demba Devareshe Jiden Jemba Jivon Deva Kano Jiva Lanam Hada Minanje Demba Sanje Jumden Dembe Java Shaja Tuva Chazen Lo Judo Jazu Jeo Kanze Kanye Zowa Jata Sajen Dena Gumba Dumbrone Mane Jiden Dena Juja Teze Keba Jela Sa Zemo Nabda Bunga Judu Ishe Jazu Seje Gumbo Ja Taban Jiden Sumnam Bombo Juni Jona Cha Zemo Chenjo Demo Tremen Sendo Jawa Jona Cha Zemo Diri Jera Zemo Nyame Chenjin Jona Cha Zemo Bombo Tuje Tangje Chenbe Demba Bo Sonam Yun Den Jazu Dijin Shena Cha Zemo Taben De Sha Chama Gewen Jido Tenam Jojo Wa Shigyo Jona Cha Chene Cheva Maya De Lava Tamara Shinge Tamba Gendela Cha Zemo Diva Chinya Misha Gawa Rangi Senen Yonzo de Tene Sanje Demba Karma Rabi Jumase Vachubroda Melanoda Jenda Dije Solomon Diatom Jesse Wanyu Homatom Neja Gada Nada Chiva Lamjube Sibe Sonen Joa
To the teacher, the blessed one, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to retain, teacher of gods and humans, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the teacher, the blessed one, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings contained, teacher of gods and humans, to you the completely, fully awakened one, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the teacher, the blessed one, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O Supreme One, humans, you were born on this earth, you paced outside in strides that say, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, formed supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the three worlds, winner of the best, to you I prostrate. With supreme signs, face like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. You are immaculate, the three worlds are not. Incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the Teacher having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. The purity which makes one free from attachment, the virtue which frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime pure reality, to that Dharma which pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See conditioned things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain the rank, all saying, subdue the foe faults, and be delivered from the ocean of suffering, of aging, sickness, and death. I go for refuge until I'm aligned to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I quickly attain the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I quickly attain the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I quickly attain the state of Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
So, are we on page 340?
Yeah, I think we got to just the beginning of 341, but we didn't finish that paragraph.
Beginning of 341.
So that
Beginning of 341.
it's in the middle of the paragraph.
Second consequences in that, right? Cognition positively determines others' object. Maybe I'll read from here. So this argument seeks to prove the existence of prior experience of the perceiving a blue object by using its subsequent recollections as the logical reason So the minority school use the reason is I remember. So if you remember, then you have experienced that in a prior time. So otherwise, if the argument were formulated as there exist for the previous perceptions of the blue object, reflexive awareness that experience it, no suitable example could be found that could be established for the other party. So they don't formulate the proof statement that way, right? Yeah. So once established that there is subjective experience of the perceiving a blue object, then such an experience can be determined to be either self-cognition or the cognized by others. The first alternative is not acceptable to you who reject self-cognitions, while the second is something that our standpoint has ruled out. So in this way, the generalities being experienced comes to be untenable for you, which means for you, even experience itself would become impossible. This is how the Chittamata argues against their opponent. In fact, this is their best argument to prove the reflexive awareness. The first it says, because I remember, so therefore I must have experienced that in the prior time. And what, how you experience to remember. The object blue to remember, experienced by the eye consciousness, and remembering the eye consciousness, perceiving the blue, and experienced by the reflexive awareness. Right? So how do you remember the object? Object remembered by particular, cognitions. So how you remember the cognitions? Cognition also cognized by, reflexive awareness. So this is so far their Chittamatra says this is the best their argument, and to back up that, and the reason they use, is there's a two-way to to cognize the subject, the consciousness, and consciousness by itself, or is cognized by other consciousness. So then, if other consciousness, and then it's like the infinite regress, right? So yesterday I said, when I remember that I had a breakfast, so I had to wait for someone to inform me to remember. That person also wait another person to recall and inform him. So it's kind of like infinite regress. It's just probably there is no time for me to remember what I had. So if I, so when I have breakfast, so remembering that I am the subjectively remembering I had a breakfast is known by, cognized by the very moment that while I'm having breakfast, there's another consciousness, the knowing that you are having breakfast. So, and then the minority school says by itself or the others, so two options. So the cognized by others is untenable, and then only left is by itself. So by itself, in the sense of the
subject, particularly like eye consciousness, seeing the blue, the eye consciousness experienced by self means reflexive awareness. It's a part of the eye consciousness. So the eye consciousness seems to be functioning in the two ways. One that is looking at the blue, one that is looking at self. So this is why Mindfulness School says, yes, there must be reflexive awareness. To continue how it is incorrect to assert that previous perceptions of the blue subject is experienced by some separate cognitions. If such were the case, the two problematic the consequences would follow. The first, there would be the problem of infinite regress, for if the cognitions explicitly perceiving a blue object established by another subsequent cognitions, the question arises, does that cognition require another separate cognition as its the cognizer? If it does not, then the previous cognitions too should not be require this subsequent cognizer. And if it does require another separate cognitions is cognition, it too would require another one, and then so on. And infinitum. Such an endless chain incurs the follow that there will be no experience of the first instance of the perception of the blue object. The second consequence is that cognition will not positively determine other objects. If the preceding cognitions were to be perceived by the subsequent cognitions, the latter would then not perceive other objects such as form and sound and so on. So it has to be hypothetically, if the eye consciousness, seeing blue is known by, next eye consciousness or the air consciousness, then, the subsequent eye consciousness or the air consciousness, knowing the first eye consciousness, then, it would not be, reflects on the object, because it's busy trying to understand the eye consciousness, how it's seeing things. Like if my air consciousness cognizing how the eye consciousness seeing the blue, so the air consciousness will forget its own object of the sound. So for the subsequent cognition will not be direct its focus to the other objects. This is because the entire continuum of cognition will, all the moment within the stream will have their preceding moment as their object. There is no problem of the logical entailment not holding here, for if the preceding cognition are perceived by the subsequent cognitions, it is on the basis of taking the preceding cognition as an appearing object. That subsequent cognition has to arise. In that case, it will not let go of the inner objective condition, which is more, proximal to take in external objects, which is more distant. So now you might offer the following rejoinder: the subsequent blue perceiving cognitions that cognize that preceding blue perceiving cognition arises simultaneously with another instance of the cognition perceiving a blue object. So there is thus no problem of the cognition not moving to others, external object. If you assert this, you will incur the consequence of the two separate continuum of the I consciousness belonging to the same class of the consciousness arising simultaneously in one and the same person. If you admit this, you would be contradicting this spiritual right statement. The sentient beings possess the singular. Sentient being possess singular or separate individual continua for each class of the consciousness. So we go membership with the unity levels. So Sutra says sentient beings, generate I consciousness, in sequence order. One by one, they perceive things, sentient beings. So which means the Buddha sees in one aspect all phenomena. Sentient beings, they kind of, they see things, know things in the order, one by one. So there's no two same consciousness generated at the same time. So then the question here is continuous, gyurjava, single continuum means. Now, when you look at the, so when you are, you can see things with eye consciousness, simultaneously hearing the sound with the ear consciousness. At the same time, you can smell, you can taste, you can feel. All five consciousness, sensual perception, can simultaneously function, right? So does that, contradict with the sutra, sentient beings, singular continuum? So then, no. The same type of consciousness, same type of consciousness, number unity was the I consciousness seeing the blue and the next consciousness seeing the yellow do not generate at the same time. So it cannot be activated at the same time. I consciousness first blue, then the yellow. I consciousness seeing the cow. I consciousness seeing the horse. So it's because there are same and different consciousness.
So it almost sounds like you can perceive with your eye, and then you'll have the moment of consciousness cognizing the color, but then that doesn't mean that you can't smell. But when you focus on smell, for example, that's another moment of
these are the different consciousness. Air consciousness, eye consciousness, different.
Right.
So they're different. So different consciousness can simultaneously act. Right. There's the same time they all can act. The same consciousness, like eye consciousness, particularly focusing on the blue, and then eye consciousness, when particularly perceiving the yellow, the green. So these eye consciousness do not generate at the same time. Like seeing color, seeing the color, and imagining the color. Imagination, the color, and the color itself. So perceived by the same type of consciousness, but they always in the sequence order.
Mm-hmm. So like if there's a room and there's 5 doors, it's one person at a time through that door, but there's 5 doors that can kind of go into that room, is in a way of thinking.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, So And another word is when you generate the eye consciousness perceiving the blue, and that very consciousness, this perceiving the blue, is not seeing the yellow and brown and black. So why sentient beings, once they see one particular color, they cannot see the others? So that's why it says sentient beings possess singular, or this separate individual continuum for each class of the consciousness. So number 7, unit levels. This also applies to the imagination of the color and experiencing the color, the two consciousness at the same time, but they don't really generate simultaneously. But you say, oh, when I see the color, I also have the imagination of the color in my mind. They says they do not generate simultaneously because they are the time, the distance of the time is too short. Therefore, you think that the two consciousness function simultaneously. Or sometimes they say like what we call alternate. So first eye consciousness see, then imagination. I again see in imaginations. You can do that in the order, right? But they don't really generate it simultaneously at the same time. So the commentary says on this point, just as 100 petals of the blue lotus are pierced by a single shot of an arrow, the consciousness arises, serially, right? Even though it seems as they engage simultaneously. This is like, when you throw the arrows, it can, penetrates many leaves together. But these, the order of the first leaf and the second leaf, it looks like they're simultaneously, but they are not simultaneous. So the explanation of the commentary take this to be response to the point being raised about whether all 5 sensory consciousness perceiving all 5 sense objects, the dancers' faces, their song, and so on, can arise simultaneously. So, and the response, according to the explanations, is that although the different class of the consciousness arises sequence, given the speed of their, engagement, it feels as if they all arises at the same time. This is totally wrong. Those who argue for the reflexive awareness, Sotantika and Chittamatra, for instance, understand the meaning of the sutra statement that sentient beings possess singular continua for each class of the consciousness. I think each class is kind of same type of consciousness. In terms of how no two continua, right? In terms of how no two continua or consciousness of the same class can arise simultaneously in a singular person. This is stated following in Dharmakirti's exposition of the valid cognitions. Potency of the consciousness are determined in terms of their similar class. So this similar class. So now this is a little bit different from there's a what do you call it? all the colors together, when you see many colors at the same time. When you look at the butterfly, you see many colors at the same time. So these are not really, this particular looking at the butterfly, the wing, the many color. So you don't generate the eye consciousness of each color. So the one eye consciousness seeing all of them. So now, other than that, to be looking at the collection of the color, if you're looking at the color one by one, so the consciousness seeing the blue is not seeing the yellow. Second, eye conscious seeing the yellow is not looking at the blue. Because these are the same type of consciousness. They don't really generate at the same time. So I think ordinary sentient beings is always they generate the particular eye consciousness, kind of similar type of consciousness in in sequence order. They're always in orderly. They generate the consciousness, the same type of consciousness. But other than that, different consciousness can be function simultaneously. Like the eye and the ear can function at the same time. Nose and tongue can function at the same time. But you can say, when I look this way, blue and yellow, and I generate eye consciousness of many, right? So am I not generating all this eye consciousness simultaneously? Say no. There's the order, one by one. But sometimes you can say, this is how the ordinary sentient beings, and then when it comes to understanding more settled than the color, more profound, the conventional reality, the ultimate reality, and again there's a gap. So when you try and understand the conventional reality, you don't see the ultimate truth. When you look at the ultimate truth, you don't see the conventional truth. But in the I think sixth bhumi, in the Buddhist article, sixth bhumi says, have the because the sixth bhumi is perfections in the wisdom, perfection of the wisdom, right? So they can, in a very maybe in a minute, within a minute, or the few seconds. So this Bodhisattvas, the sixth bhumi, can, single-pointedly meditate in emptiness, directly, and within the few seconds they can come up and they can engage in a conventional reality, and within the few seconds they can go back to that. So this is why, even they are not Buddha, but it looks like that they function like a Buddha. So they can deep in the meditation at the same time they can talk, they can eat and walk and give the teaching. So while they're giving teaching, they might within this few seconds they can go deep in the emptiness. So then, other than six bhumi, the Bodhisattvas and Arhats, the Aryas, the ordinary sentient beings. So they have, their mind is not that kind of, sharp or active, like. So I think from this we can understand particularly how the Buddha sees things. Buddha can see within the second, seeing one, seeing all. So that's why, all knower or the omniscient. So the minority school, the point is now, here's the potency of the consciousness that determined in terms of their similar class. So which means it's definitely not the case that these Sotandika and Chidama understand the sutra, the statement, suggested that consciousness belonging to the different class cannot arise simultaneously in a single person. Some Tibetan assert that when asked, when you look at the colorful, brocade, so do the numerous cognitions, perceiving the different colors, white and red and so on, arise simultaneously, one should respond to the although these distinct cognition arises sequentially, and they appears to arise at the same time. Those who say this fail to comprehend that the sutra statement about the continuum of the consciousness being singular is indeed it means non-occurrence, right, of the multiple stream of the primary consciousness belonging to the same class, by displaying their ignorance of the simple fact that visual cognition perceives the multiple color simultaneously, they appears to be unable to even comprehend visual perceptions of the multiple color object. Lama Zopa said these Tibetan masters have not understood. So same similar type, the consciousness always in the generates in the sequence order, in the orderly. That does not mean one single eye consciousness looking at the butterfly. It's not talking about when you look at the butterfly, you don't generate eye consciousness of the blue, eye consciousness of the red, eye consciousness. It's just one eye consciousness that sees all multiple colors.
Like the butterfly itself.
Yeah.
Right.
So the eye consciousness of the butterfly, multiple color, is not the eye consciousness perceiving blue. It's not the eye consciousness, perceiving yellow or red. So it's just multiple colors. Eye consciousness of the multiple color, eye consciousness of blue, eye consciousness of yellow are different. In the light of these considerations, it seems we need to interpret Chandrakirti's passage together with his analogies as a response to the objections pertaining to the simultaneous arises of the multiple stream of the consciousness belonging to the same class. So with his response being that although they arises serially, right? The consciousness appears as if they are simultaneous because of their speed. So this said, as stated in the explanation of the valid cognitions, the two schools, the Sotandika and the Chittamatra, that argue for the reflexive awareness actually rejected the first speed of the cognition's engagement as being a cause for the illusion of the simultaneities. It is therefore difficult to state that as being the position of those two schools. Perhaps the problem here stems of some corruptions in the Indian text of the Chandrakirti's commentary. So Lama Zopa says, if this is what you found in the text, so there's the problem in the text. So whatever the case, this is the matters requiring the further investigation by those of the discerning intellect. So Lama Tsongkhapa always, many times you can find when you quoted the great master in India, and sometimes he also find some need to be corrections. So discerning, in brief, the Chitramathas conclude that since one must avoid above two flaws, that of the infinite regress and that of the subsequent cognitions, not perceiving the other object, others will have no choice but to accept the reflexive awareness without any reservations. It is thus on the basis of the subsequent recollection of the both object and its subjective experience that Chitramata adduces the experience of the both object and the subject in the very moment, and one perceived the blue, and now once they succeed in establishing such cognizing reflexive awareness, they believe then the existing of their dependent or other power nature will be affirmed by such reflexive awareness. This is why when the Madhyamika asks the questions, by what means its existence knowns? So what means that what means that you believe the other power natures are truly exist? Chitramata presents this the proof of the reflexive awareness as their response. So the reflexive awareness is so crucial in the binomial school because from the reflexive awareness, and Chitramata says, now we can say the object of I consciousness is not truly exist, but the I consciousness is truly exist. And then we ask, in what base you can constitute the I consciousness is the only thing, subject that it truly exists, not the object. And then they say, oh, this is known by the reflexive awareness. Because the reflexive awareness of the I consciousness experience and perceive the I consciousness non-dualistically. Because there's no separate. The I consciousness is object, sees the dualistically. So therefore, the object of I consciousness is not truly existing, but the subject I consciousness truly exists, known and experienced by the reflexive awareness. So the Prasangika school says, yes, we can agree with you if there is reflexive awareness. So you still haven't really proved, the reflexive awareness is there, or you haven't really proved, there is, needed for the reflexive awareness. So, recalling, in the previous experience, for us, there is no need for the reflexive awareness. So to remember something is, because of the previous consciousness, not because of the reflexive awareness.
Right.
So the Chitramata is so important. They just, push that the reflexive awareness is there. And the reflexive awareness, the way it perceives the subject consciousness and the consciousness perceiving the objects. And they says each of the consciousness, air consciousness, and the perceiving the object, mistakenly. And how it mistaken with respect to their appearance. The object appears to the sensory perceptions is external. That is not true. Now the reflexive awareness directly experiences the eye consciousness, air consciousness, tongue consciousness is non-dualistically. So the reflexive awareness, the eye consciousness, perceive the eye consciousness, but they don't, reflexive awareness has no appearing of eye consciousness being different from it. It is like the tongue touches the taste. No kind of, there's no dualistic things. But still, the Prasangika school says we are still not really, convinced that, there is the require of the reflexive awareness, and we still have not found the valid reason to establish there is reflexive awareness. So we don't see the condition, we don't see the need for that reflexive awareness.
So it sounds like the Prasangika doesn't even have a problem with their reasoning for, what was it, the two consequences that they posed, where they said the first one being about the infinite regress and that the positively determining. They don't have a problem with that, but they're basically saying you're giving us something and that's great, but you're not doing anything more than just kind of labeling things.
Yeah, the Prasangika school says, the consciousness perceived the object to recall that subjective experience.
Mm-hmm.
So it can done by the subject experience the object.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no another condition to make that recall.
Right.
So and then Prasangika also refuting that anything that you perceive, you have to perceive by itself or the others. The Prasangika school said there is no such thing as born by itself and born by others. How can consciousness perceive things, that done by the consciousness by itself or the others? So that kind of logic is not really, kind of not much making sense to us. So now the Prasangika school refuting that positions. So this has three parts: the actual refutations, how recollection arises in the absence of the reflexive awareness according to our system, and three, the rebutting the objections arises against our refutations. So actual refutations are the root text of the Chabikiti. If you say this reflexive awareness is proven by later recollections, this is not so. So this is not so. And Prasangika school says you keep insist that the reflexive awareness must precede, because of the recollections, because of the remembering the object or the subject, and then says it's not so. You haven't really proven yet. For the evidence you cite the remain itself unproven. So how can you put, for example, if you want to, the establish or the constitute the reflexive awareness with each consciousness. So how do you put in syllogistic? So if you put in syllogistic, for example, if I want to the constitute the table is impermanent, I would say table is impermanent because it's produced from the cosmic condition, like bread, right? So we say that. So there is the example that we can both can agree on. So if you put the syllogism like, oh, I consciousness has the reflexive awareness because because there's the remembering, there's the recollection of the I consciousness and its object. So, for example, what? So you see, you don't have example. The unproven and what is not established cannot be valid proof. If you cannot prove through the valid reasonings, so then it is not really reliable. It's not really, If you, the Chittamatra, claim on this assumption of there being intrinsic, right? Intrinsic characteristic that by the occurrence of the later recollections, prior cognitions that is being recalled is established as a self cognized. This is not so for the evidence you cite to prove the reflexive awareness to the other party for whom it remains unproven. So now you have two options. If you want to say, I consciousness has the reflexive awareness because there's the recollection of I consciousness object. Or, and if you put this way, you don't have example to share. And the second you says, oh, I consciousness, I consciousness must have experienced by the consciousness because there's the recollections of its object. And then we say what do you mean by experience of the I consciousness? So I consciousness itself is the experience. I consciousness experience of the color. I consciousness experience of the shape. So are you saying experience of the experiencer of the experience? And then we say, no, you don't need experience of the experience. So if you in the how's that subject and the predicate, if you use the predicate as an experiencer, and then we say there is no such thing. And if you say this experience is experience. I consciously experience the color, and that is still experience. So there is no clear kind of how any way you are kind of any of your syllogistic reasonings is unclear. For the evidence, the cite to prove the reflexive awareness to the other parties of whom remain unproven. The purported, right? How to pronounce this? Purported, okay. Intrinsically existing the recollections cannot be valid proof of the reflexive awareness. So this would be like citing a proof of the sound being impermanence, that is visible things. So sound is impermanent because it is visible things. It can be touched. It can be felt. So if, however, your assertions is within the context of the worldly convention, in that case, there is no such recollections. That is the effect of the reflexive awareness. We still say you haven't really proved yet. So why that so? Why is that so? You may ask. Just as if there is fire, smoke can be perceived as its effect. Similarly, reflexive awareness does exist. One can then establish its causal relation. So when you say, I can see the smoke, therefore there must be a fire. So how can you say, I can remember something, therefore there is reflexive awareness? Because if you're trying to prove someone, if you are not sure, when we both looking at the mountain, but both sees the smoke, and then others are not sure about there is a smoke and there fire or not, and then the person, another one says, oh, there must be fire because there's a smoke. So we both agree in the relation of the smoke and the fire. So to prove, mindfulness school proving to the Prasangic school, you cannot say eye consciousness must have experienced by the reflexive awareness because I remember. I remember that the color that experienced the eye consciousness. Because you haven't really proved. We are not agree on, we are not both the opponents and proponent should not agree on the relation of the recollections and the reflexive awareness. So if reflexive awareness does exist, one can then establish the causal relations such as the occurrence of the subsequent recollections, in which case one can ascertain the self-cognizing awareness on the basis of the subsequent recollections. However, since the reflexive awareness remains still unestablished for the other party, how can there be the recollections, the supposed effect of the self-cognitions, which is thought to emerge through the necessary causal relation with reflexive awareness? That there can be no proof in the absence of the necessary causal relation is illustrated by the way one can infer the presence of the jewel water crystal from what's that? Presence of the jewel water crystal from the mere presence of the body of water. I think.
Very poetic. Saying that.
Yeah, I think, we heard it many times, the chule chushe, so there's a crystal, water from the crystal, and then from the sun, there's a,
Reflection of diamonds.
No, there's we call meshe. There's the glass that can burn the grasses.
Oh, magnifying glass.
Magnifying glasses. From the magnifying glasses, the fire, from the crystal, the water, or the water from the crystals. So there's some kind of, you see the relations. For the body of the water can appear from the rain and so on. Similarly, the fire can appear from the rubbing the dry sticks. I will explain later how likewise the recollections can occur. Recollection can occur according to our own systems without existing of such reflexive awareness. Now, so here the Prasangika is saying recollections can, recollections is because of the continuity of the true subject. So sometimes there are the recollections to true consciousness, continuity consciousness, perceiving the same object. Therefore, you can say is a recollection. First you see the tree, and the next time again you remember the tree. So that's called recollection. And another recollection is the continuum of that consciousness. So each of them is the recollections. When we have conversations, and so when you talk about, if you are telling me about the, about the dogs, and how do you kind of, keep a pet as a dog, and then I can recall, oh, that reminds me, my friends has a dog and something like that. So these are recollections. When you say something, it's similar things that remembering and continue. So this, why is the is the same continuity of consciousness. So all of them are recollections. So the first consciousness, produce the similar type of consciousness, the algorithm. So you say, these are not the result of the reflexive awareness. Then in that case, like when there's a sound coming from the guitar, the fire from the magnifying glasses. So these are just one conditioning a second. So there is no, in the between there's another condition. You don't need it. So the recollection means without interrupting the continuing of the, memory of something. Reflexive awareness. To this refutation, Chaitanya might respond as follows: we do not infer the reflexive awareness on the promise of establishing the causal connections between subsequent recollection and the reflexive awareness in the manner of the inferring the fire from the smoke. Rather, as stated before, we first infer the existence of the experiencing of the prior consciousness on the basis of subsequent recollections. Furthermore, we demonstrate how such an experience must be either self-cognizing or the other cognized. For there is no third possibilities. In this way, the conclusions is drawn that the cognitions are self-experienced. So it looks like they are going in the different directions. Minority school, the Prasangic school, when they explain why there's a recollection of things, why there's the memory to keep coming. And the Prasangic school says the memory is the first consciousness draws another memory of the consciousness. And that consciousness actively, engagement of that object, that brings another same type of memories. So, and this continuum of the recollections of the memories is like a cause and condition. Fire from the fire to the smoke, from the milk to the yogurt. So, the minority school says, no, we are not talking about the continuities. We are, the present minority school says we are just trying to explain why there is the recollections of the object, because object has experienced prior time. Previously you have experienced. Now, second, why is the recollection of the subject that experienced the object? then mindfulness school says there must be, the cognizer. There is the experiencer of that experience. So the Prasangika school says, that's very, very, you're trying to do something, so when we say so there's a cow and the milk and the yogurt and the butter, and you say, now from the yogurt, I can make cow. So so the Prasangika school says, so the continuities we can accept. If he now says, from the cow to the milk, milk to the yogurt to the butter, now from the butter I can make cow. That is impossible. So, but still, the reflexive awareness is the best of their evidence. For them, it is best evidence to think the consciousness is the only thing that truly exists. So this is what the opponents might contend, right? But being experienced by the cognitions need not, in fact, be limited to these two mode of, these two modes as defined by the Sutantikas and Chitramatra. What the opponent might contend, but being experienced by cognition need not in fact be limited to these two modes as defined by the Sutantika and Chittamantras. For example, although the light of an oil lamp does not illuminate itself, so there's another, the minority school, their kind of logic to proving the reflexive awareness is the light. So the Prasangika school says the oil lamp does not illuminate itself. So the minority says if the oil lamp is illuminating or dispelling the darkness, so then it has to be eliminating the darkness to itself and others. Right? So the Prasangika school says the oil lamp does not illuminate itself, or it is not dispelling the darkness of itself. This does not negate it being an illumination. Similarly, although the cognition does not experience itself in the manner that defined by the opponents. So there is no need, the experiencing of the color by the consciousness, need to be experienced by another experiencers. So nothing by itself. So the minority school insists, yes, if you remember the experience, there must be the experiencer of the experience. So if the Chittamatra say that the light of the oil lamp illuminates itself, in that case, the darkness must conceal itself. So if the light is illuminating itself, clearing itself, and the darkness could conceal itself. It can hide itself. So then, according to you, the darkness would be obscured by the darkness too. For instance, the fundamental wisdom says, Nagarjuna's root text, for if the oil lamp illuminate itself and the others, the darkness too should no doubt conceal itself and others. If the darkness has no activities of concealing itself, hiding itself, and then why the light, the body lamp, has the activity of illuminating itself. Even if reflexive awareness were allowed for the sake of argument, it would still be logical for memory to recall the prior cognitions. The two being different, it would be like recollection of the someone with no prior knowledge. These reasonings destroy all others aspect of the purported proof. Tembe temba ring change ma shi ju le ke ba shi tenzi de le ke ba ta jom. Magazine no shi ju. Che ji she ba no ro de tu. Chi gu la ro ri ma tu tu ba che ba shi je ba ye temba. Ro shin ju ju ba tu ba ro ri tu che min de. Ta mi ta chi su je shi. So, and then another, even the reflexive awareness was allowed for the sake of argument, it would still be illogical for memory to recall the prior cognitions. So then the question, second is the recollections of the blue color and experiencing the eye consciousness of the blue color. According to the Binona school, they're the different consciousness. So this is the different consciousness. For the Prasangik school, it's like apple and orange. Different is apple and orange. So this is almost like I can recall what Logan has experienced. So the difference. So because the recollections means previous consciousness has ceased to exist, and that influence the consciousness to re-enter in the object, the previous consciousness. So it's no different. Like the Prasangik school, I think many times they say yogurt is no different from the milk. Barley sprout is no different from the barley seed, because it's continuing. Right? So in the Prasangik school, it says, this is like an algorithm. One brings another one. So that's how the recollection happened. The memory is happening. It's not because there's another reflexive consciousness that has to be conditioned in order to remember something. The first consciousness by itself, it cannot really bring any memory, but in order for the eye consciousness to bring the recollection of the object that experiences the eye consciousness, is there's no need for the third condition. So even for the sake of argument, we were to let go of our critical examinations and allow the reflexive awareness and its awareness of the object as well. For you, it would still illogical for memory to recall both, because you accept, the recollections and the recollections of the object of eye consciousness. The eye consciousness are different. Will it still be illogical for memory to recall the word subject and experience? This is because you maintain the subsequent recollection and the prior cognitions of object to be distinct by virtue of their intrinsic nature. So intrinsic is the difference. So which means there's no relation. So it's like Upagupta's the mind, for example, does not remember the Maitriya's reflexive awareness or his experience of the perceiving object. So what Maitreya has seen cannot be remembered by the Upagupta. Simple reasons that he has no knowledge of these. Such recollections cannot occur in someone who does not possess the associated prior cognitions. This would be like recollection of someone with no prior knowledge or experience. The two being intrinsically different, it means that even the subsequent cognitions within the same mental continuum would not have experienced the prior cognitions and its object. So there cannot be their recollections. If you, the Chittamatra, think recollection does exist because those that belonging to the single continuum exist as in the cause and effect, this too would be untenable for this reasoning, because they exist intrinsically as other, destroys as well as other aspect of purported proof, such as belonging to the shared single continuum, being cause and effect, and so on. This is something that has already been explained extensively above in the context of the mind, quality of the Maitreya and of the Gupta. So now, the Prasangika schools saying that recollection is because of the previous consciousness that cease to exist and leave the imprints, that conditions another consciousness. So now this can be like, for example, if I see the color through my eye consciousness, and the recollection of that is also engaged the same object, what eye consciousness has seen, or my recollection can change a little bit of the color. If I recall the color, the green color, that the eye consciousness seeing the green color on the leaf. So recollections of that, first remembering the green color of the leaf, and that again kind of, generates another recollections of the green color with, flowers or green color of the t-shirts. They continuously remember something, right? So these all are recollections. Is that, the previous consciousness is, turned into something else. So that the relations, the experience and the recollections that remember, the relation is because like a cause and effect.
almost goes back to the not thing you said before, not end, but and, like in terms of like previous lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this, yeah, I don't know. We can, when the Prasanga school explains, this is like a chain of the, chain of that experience or the way you perceive the object and continuously. But your subject can be changed. And the subject, when the subject changed, its object was also changing. So that is just kind of relations, how this functioning is just, it's no different from the magnifying glasses for the fire, the guitar from the sound, the sound from the guitars, and from the balisi to the sprout. So it's the same thing. So in the Prasanga school, this is a continuing because of the previous consciousness, and you don't need, something, third condition, or it's the reflexive awareness. So you don't need additional any kind of condition there. One consciousness can bring the memory. So so when you refute the reflexive awareness, and then the mind-only school has nothing left, no proof of the consciousness is the only thing that truly exists. So the object of the consciousness is not true, but the consciousness is true. So the Prasanga school said, when the dream objects are unreal, the consciousness seeing the unreal is also unreal. So if the dream, the visual object for the dream consciousness is unreal, and eye consciousness seeing the color in the dream is also unreal. Right? Because there is no eye sense power in the dream, but you dream consciousness, in the dream you think you have eye sense power. Right? So in the dream you have eye faculty, that is unreal. And knowing that you are seeing through the eye consciousness also unreal. So the subject and the objects equally, not intrinsically exist, equally dependent and arising. Yeah. So how recollection arises in the absence of the reflexive awareness according to our systems. This has two parts. The approach present in this text and the approach present in the other texts. This text and the Chandakita is the root text. Now this explains how the Prasanga school thinks that without the reflexive awareness, you can still have the recollection of the object. Apart from the recollection of the experience of the object, for us, there is no recollection that is, extraneous.
Just looking at the question, it says, according to you, who does not accept reflexive awareness, how does it occur? In response, we already explained above. Just feels like, I've already said this.
It's like, don't make me angry.
I just told you this.
康健康个运用觉得了，怎么的些俺的喜悦明白，这些俺也多年成就，连今天他也出路意思。Apart from the recollection of the experience of the object for us, there is no recollection that is extraneous. So therefore, the memory, I saw that, can occur. This too is within the norms of the worldly convention. Recollections of the experience of the object. So when Prasangika school say that, this implying that, the recollection of the, experience of the object. So what kind of, the recollection of the, like, what, other than that, what is that memory? The recollection of the experience of the object is done by the previous consciousness which has actively engaged on the object, right? Other than that, what is the memory of that object? If this is the memory, so the memory is not necessarily conditioned by reflexive awareness, because that the very subject that experiences the consciousness can, cause the memory. The questions, according to you, who do not accept the reflexive awareness, how does recollection occur then? So we already explained above how. In our systems, there is no such recollections that is intrinsically extraneous to the prior experience of the object. So the recollection of the color and eye consciousness perceiving the color in the Prasangika school says is not intrinsically separate. So I have also already stated how in ordinary people there does not, what's that, right? There does not exist grasping at the intrinsic, separateness, right, of the things that are cause and effect within the single shared mental continuum. So I think this is very, reasonable from the eye to see things, because of having seen by eye can recall. So if the eye consciousness seeing and ear consciousness listening to sound has the enough potential to generate the recollection of the object, experience of the object, then why do you need the reflexive awareness other than the eye consciousness? Like a seed and sprouts. So say Prasangika school, it's very simple. The sprout that's the arisen from, from the seed or the sprout that is, that arises at the cessation of the body's seed. So therefore, the sprout that arisen is no different from the seed that has ceased to exist at the time of arising. So therefore, even here, with respect to the prior cognitions of an object and its subsequent recollections too, which are cause and effect, there is no grasping at intrinsically established separateness of the two, insofar as the inner perceptions of the worldly people are concerned. So the one thing is saying Prasanga is called from the seed, the sprout, and so it's not intrinsically separate, and the continuum. There is the continuum of that seed, and there is, the effect that comes from the previous seed. So this is even the ordinary people, the mundanes, have the knowledge of the continuum. Right? So then that relations and the relation of the Bali seed and sprout. Bali sprout has emerged from, coming from seed, is relatively conventional. So there is no dispute, even in the ordinary knowledge. So according to what is seen by the visual perceptions of the blue object, he would use the convention like, this I have seen before as well. So this is why they said, this is I have seen before. This clearly shows that there is no conception of one's prior experience and subsequent recollections, as well as their respective choose object, as being somehow distinct by virtue of their intrinsic characteristic. When it comes to the perception of the ordinary people of the world, if this is not the case, and the cognition and its subsequent recollections are distinct from each other by virtue of their intrinsic characteristic, then the person could recall an experience belonging to someone else's mental continuum. Since what is the prior cognition has experienced and determined are not something that the subsequent recollections did not experience or determine. So the memory, I saw that before as well, can occur. This too is something to be accepted within the norms of the worldly convention. It should not be presented by the means of the critical analysis, whereby not contained with the mere designations. One searches for this objective reference, right? The referent over the above and what's that? Construct for were we to search the subjective reference and the designations, nothing can be found, indicating that they are fictitious and a mere conventional word. So Prasangika is saying that even when you ask ordinary people, who has seen something, therefore they remember. So ordinary people do not have any thought that, what I remember and what I have seen earlier and true consciousness, if they're distincted by their own nature. They don't feel this, they feel like the same. Oh, this I've seen, now I'm again seeing it. Right? So they don't say what I saw was different. This is I remember is the different. So then, yeah. Yeah, any questions? Any questions?
I thought I had one written down somewhere. I don't know. We'll see if I find it.
So the one thing here is, for example, if someone, if someone telling me about his mother's, the condition of his mother's, then suddenly my mind reflects with my own mother's. So now the question here is that remembering my mother's is conditioned by reflecting on someone else's mother's. So the question here is, are these two minds one continuum? The objects is other mother and my mother's. So now here, how can this be the recollections?
Why not?
Huh?
Why not?
So, the mindful school may say, or someone who believes, someone who is asserting the reflexive awareness, they may say, reflecting on your own mother's, actively, reflecting on others' mothers, where you have a different object. Therefore, the subject of perceiving others' mother as your own mothers are also different. This is not the continuum of that. So, and how can this be continuum? So, as I say, when you see the green color of the leaf, suddenly remember, you can remember, oh, I have a green t-shirts. So that reminds you of something. So here is, objects is the main thing is because you kind of, the main point of that looking at the green color of the leaf is the main is the green that recalls your green shells, right? So the green from the green, another green. So object may be not exactly the same, but this is still, you can say it's a recollection of that green leaf. So sometimes when we have a conversations, it will kind of last for a long 2-3 hours. So it keep reminding you of something, and you talk about that. That reminds another one, and then you continue to stay there. So all of that is the recollections. So it's the same continuum.
I guess it makes me think of how if I were to apply this in a practical, like, knowledge somewhere, it makes me think of how maybe in meditation sometimes there's this searching for like a clear mind, like searching for an objective mind maybe. Like, okay, I'm gonna sit here and then I'm gonna make it go away and then there it is. But I guess what this makes me want to reinforce is experiencing that continuity maybe a little bit more and less grasping on like a perfect state. I don't know if that makes sense. Like the like trying to find the what am I trying to say? The mind basis of all, or like this consciousness that's intrinsic like that, and more so experience the continuity that the Prasangika are kind of saying that is more the nature of it, the more natural state of flow. Seems.
Yeah, there's the flow of the consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Prasangika school, they're trying to point out that, this kind of this flow of similar type of consciousness continue. As the recollection is none other than this continue the flow of the consciousness.
Right.
So this continuity of the flow of consciousness, can be conditioned by the first consciousness. So if the I consciousness can continue the recollections, why do you need the reflexive awareness? If just looking at the green can recall, green and seeing the green, both, right? From one experience you recall, and why do you need another experiencer for the experience? So it's pretty much very, very, Prasangika school has the way they explain is very, it's very logical and it is very convincing. But minor school, they have to, hold on that reflexive awareness. If this loss and there truly existence of the consciousness is no proof. So how many times they got defeated and they still go back and hold on the reflexive awareness. Sometimes in the Prajaparamita Sutras, there are some, in the sutras, sometimes they mention about, it's not explicitly, pointing to the minor school. And sometimes Buddha says, if you use the medicines, so the grasping at the intrinsic nature, when I explain the dependent originations, and you just say, dependent originations, therefore things do not exist, intrinsically exist. And again, you go back and say, that absence of intrinsic is truly exist. So this is like, Buddha says, this is like you take the medicine to heal, to cure the illness, and the medicine hasn't digested yet in your body. So instead of it's curing the illness, it will cause fever in your body. It will, So the minor school is like that. They kind of understands the dependent originations. They kind of understands the some parts of the emptiness, and they use and they apply that. Therefore there's no external reality. So by negating the external reality, and then go back to consciousness is truly existing. Sometimes, like they given the medicine, and you don't really open the packet; you just eat the packet. So then,
I'm having some difficulty again with some of this. And I can't quite understand the implications of what I'm thinking and how it would affect both the Prasangika and the mind-only school. But I remember a teacher of mine in college who he taught psychology, but he was a researcher as well. And he was able to, there's these microscopic animals called planaria. And planaria can be somehow conditioned or trained to react to light. And of course, we would say they're somewhat distinct. It's almost like some of the things in Buddhism. It's somewhat distinct, but you can't say it's one. You can't say it's separate. But in any case, his experiment was to condition these planaria. They're microscopic like worms or so, I don't know exactly.
Is it bacteria?
Huh?
Is it bacteria?
No, they're one-celled animals. They're very simple one-celled animals. I don't know even if the theory is the same these days as when I was in college. When I was in college, bacteria was not considered to have all the necessary elements of a life form. And there were distinctions that were made, and I don't know if research over the years have changed the conclusion or not. But here's the thing. Mm-hmm. He trained these planaria to react to light. And then he crushed them up. In other words, the animals that had been trained. And he fed them, the almost like cannibalism, right? Mm-hmm. He fed them to other planaria. Oh, yeah. And the planaria, which had not been trained to react to light, after eating the ones that had been trained, were able to react to light, mm-hmm. which means that this had to do with DNA and RNA, and RNA is found in our body as a result of conditioning. And the implication is that the RNA, which you could say it's a form of memory, right? After all, it's conditioning that's reacting to light. You fed it to a new animal, and suddenly the new animals had that same ability, even though they'd never been conditioned. So then if that's the case, then you say, do they have now the same memories as the other animals? Is it now maybe they share the same memory, because the memory is actually it's somehow chemical in some ways. So then if that's the case, is memory serial like we were describing it? One you see yellow, then you see blue, and then you see green? Or is it possible memory can be shared on the physical level? Even though our ordinary experience, even in our ordinary experience, to some extent memory can be shared, but not exactly, right? Everyone has their own.
I think that sounded like, the reason that I like the salad is because I had eat the beef. Because the memory is the beef coming to me, so therefore I look at the green grass, I want to eat it. So,
But what I can't figure out
so maybe I don't like grass. So.
if this is true, and also there were things, as I recall, when LSD was being researched, there was the claim, at least I saw made, that there was genetic memory, that people whose ancestors had been traumatized continue to carry the trauma in them, although they themselves did not have the experience. They carried the genetic memory of the trauma. So the question is, if one entertains this possibility that memory can be shared and maybe doesn't have to be serial like we think, it can be passed on. What is the implication? This is what I don't understand. What kind of implication would it have for this debate between the mind-only school? Would it have any implication, or maybe not? Or maybe there would be an implication for this debate between the mind-only school and the Prasangika school, and for whether consciousness somehow inherently exists or does not. I don't know. I mean, to me, when I think of these weird things, these weird instances, then I have to say, I don't know that I can come to a conclusion. I'm not so sure I can come to a conclusion.
I think Lama Zoga will very much need for your assurance of whether it's the reflexive awareness is existing or not existing. So I think here, you need to know the point. So the minority school says the memory, memory is because of the reflexive awareness. Memory is not because of the things that you perceived in earlier. Just being able to see things cannot, just by that, you cannot have the memory of that. So the minority school says reflexive awareness, without that, you cannot remember. Even hypothetically, if you remember without the reflexive awareness, you can remember the object, but you cannot say, I have seen it. So that's the minority school, they say, you're not just remembering the object, you also remember the experience of that. Yes, the object is because of this, the consciousness, the prior consciousness, the experience, therefore you remember. How do you remember? I have experienced it. So that's the minority school insisting on that. So if you have never seen before, you have never perceived that object before, and minority school, that it's impossible to remember that. So now you remember the blue because your eye consciousness has seen that in the prior time. Now the second is, in what condition do you remember experiencing of that, and who has perceived that? When do you know that? So that's my. So it's all about. It's not talking about the memory, how its memory is coming. What is the argument is because of that. There is the subject remembering is because of reflexive awareness. The mind, Prasangika school says, subject and object both remember by experience of the subject. When you see something, that being seen is the condition to remembering object and the subject. That I think that's all about. And then Prasangic school says, reason is, these two consciousness, the difference and the different time, but the same continuum. So the continuum means from the barley seed to the barley sprout, milk to the yogurt. So the milk to turn into yogurt, just by milk being disintegrating is the turning yogurt. You don't need another salt or the baking powder to make that happen. So the continuity. So and then so that's the kind of Prasangic school says you don't need the reflexive awareness in order for remember the subject experience. And then the minority school, their kind of backup reasoning is, seeing something and experience by itself and others. And that minority school thinks this is their best kind of argument. And the Prasangic school says, when you eye conscious see color, then you cannot say eye consciousness by itself is seeing, or it's eye conscious seeing by others. The both are not. And then minority school use the example, the butter lamp, it illuminates itself and it illuminates others. And my Prasangic school said, no, butter lamp do not illuminate itself. It do not dispel the darkness of itself. And if the butter lamp does illuminating itself, and darkness conceal itself. And then once the darkness start concealing, hiding itself, then probably it's hard to find the darkness. If the darkness is not concealing itself, and how the light is illuminating itself. So that logic is, debunked now. Yeah, this much you just think. Yeah. Very good.
Chanju semjo rinpoche ma yeba na geji yeba nyamba meba nye kone kone tonye dawa rinpoche ma yeba na geji yeba nyamba meba nye kone kone hama semje dante deda nyandro tamje tato ton chanju semba kama suju dada kone dubje kare rabe kobe shima penda dewa ma ju jere zama dinzin yazo yishabe side bandu.
May the precious Bodhi mind not get born and rise and grow. May that born have no decline but increase forevermore. May the precious mind realizing emptiness not get born and rise and grow. May that born have no decline but increase forevermore. Due to all these merits, may all Father and Mother sentient beings have all the happiness, and may all the lower realms be empty forever. Wherever there are bodhisattvas, may all their prayers be accomplished immediately.
In the sacred land surrounded by
snow mountains,
you are
the
the
source of all benefit and happiness. O powerful changes is the intrinsic Gatso, remain in this world until sunset.
Thank you very much.